since then, those attacks of 9/11, we've had two major shooting wars. We've had a global pandemic. We've had the three most contentious presidential elections that we've ever had in our history. And we've got another one coming up this fall that may prove to be once again the most contentious that we've ever had in our history. We've had upheavals. We've had all kinds of stuff go on in our lives in this time span. And I just sat down and started reflecting on, various things. Brother Scott was our preacher at this time. A lot of people that would have been here on that Wednesday night service in August of 2001 have gone on. A lot are here, but a lot that were here, I'm sure that Wednesday night have gone on. A lot of new faces in our church, and I'm very glad to see that too. But over the course of these years, since this lesson was taught, there's been a lot of things that have happened. The world's changed. There was no such thing as a smartphone in 2001. The internet, believe it or not, was kind of in its infancy. We didn't live our lives online. We still reconciled our checkbooks every month by hand, which I still do, by the way. But I know most people don't. But just the monumental shifts, you have to look and think about things that are in your life today that are the same as they were back a couple of weeks before 9/11. And the reason I think that I came back to this lesson that was taught then is kind of gave me a lesson that, God is still God. And if we could have looked forward from this lesson that was taught in August of 2001. Now, those of you in my class, I'm sure you remember, just so y'all can just tune out. I know you remember all the classes that I teach. It's a little attempt at humor. But anyway, if we could have looked ahead to the next 24 years, or 23 years rather, of what was going to happen in our lives after this lesson had been taught, it's interesting what we would have thought when we were going through this lesson at the time and what we think when we go back to it today. So this is a lesson in Psalm 139 about God's omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence. And the verses in here so mesh, as they always do. But when you look at life in the block of time from now back to when this lesson was taught, it really, to me, was very thought-provoking. So when I was thumbing through looking for something specific in these Sunday school books last night, I kept coming back to this one thing. And so, anyway, we're in Psalm 139 tonight, picking up in verse 1. It says, O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my downsitting and my uprising. Thou understandest my thought afar off. Thou compassest my path and my lying down, and art acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Thou hast beset me behind and before, and laid thine hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain unto it. So, this lesson rather is the other mic. One second. You know where that might be, Randy?
It's on the pulpit, I think.
How about that? That better? So the omniscience of God, He knows all. So all of the things that have happened since this lesson was taught in August of 2001 haven't come as a surprise to God. He's omnipresent, so He's everywhere. So all of the events, the planning, the execution, all of the stuff that's happened since then, He's been present. He is not just, He is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent, but He's not just that. That's like his overarching characteristics. But even through all of that, he's still a very personal God. And that's one of the things that I like about Psalm 139. It talks about the big mountaintop attributes of God, but it brings it down into a personal way. So in verse 1, he says, "O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me." And so thinking about the things that have happened in the last several years, it's easy for people to be disconnected. So one of the things that I kind of was looking for some support to talk about tonight is I read an article a week or two ago about how people's lives have changed over the last several years, and that loneliness and despair and separation and isolation are such a huge part of people's life today, and it didn't used to be. And it's interesting that you can be in an auditorium full of people and be alone. You can be pretty much anywhere in your life, and we focus on our thing, and I do it too. Everyone in here does. I'm the world's worst to have something I want to look up that's useful and needful and start chasing rabbits all over the place. I'm the world's worst. And we now have access to social media, and we all are subject to seeing and reading and hearing things on social media that try to convince us that this is the way things ought to be. And in some cases, that's good. I mean, word travels extremely fast nowadays, much faster than it always did, and that it can be good, but it also can be bad. And so to know that we still have a personal God who cares about me and cares about you. Now, he cares about us, but he cares what happens in your life when we're little babies. And we'll see in this lesson tonight, he knew us then. When you're a little baby, you're a baby. You don't know what's going on. You don't determine anything. You eat what your parents put in your mouth. You wear what your parents put on you. You get bathed when they bathe you. You sleep when they put you down. And then, of course, you mature and you grow. But even through all of that, God knows us. So in verse 1, he knows us. He has searched us, and he knows me. And, of course, by extension, knows you too. In verse 2, he knows our thoughts. So, thou knowest my downsitting and my uprising, thou understandest my thought afar off. So, there's never any place where we can go and be where God doesn't know our thoughts and our intimate inside. Now, we can all put on a show on the outside and present something that looks different than what it is. Hopefully, nobody in here does that, but we have that ability to present ourselves as being something different than what we are, but we don't get away with that with God. He knows what's going on up here and in here. He knows our thoughts. He knows our attitudes. He knows our inspirations, our incentives, our expectations. He knows all of that stuff. And so for those of us that are Christian, that does give me some measure of comfort that, no matter where I am or what's going on, I'm not alone. But it also, I'm not going to stand up here and lie. There's thoughts that go through my mind from time to time that I would prefer God not know about. And I think back to some of the stuff that I thought before I was saved, and I really hope, but he knew. And so it brings comfort, but we'll get to that a little later as well. But he does know our thoughts. Verse 3, thou compassest my path and my lying down, and art acquainted with all my ways. So he knows our comings and goings. So we all come together 3 times a week. So when we're all in this room, we all know where each other is. But within minutes of us walking out those doors back there, we won't know where each other is until Sunday. Liz and I know where each other is, but the rest of everyone, we don't. but God does. He knows our comings, He knows our goings, He knows our stayings, He knows whatever it is that we're doing, whatever it is we're up to, He knows our comings and goings, and He goes with us. And then in verse 4, it says, there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. So He knows what we say. So He knows our thoughts, He knows our activities, and He knows what we say. One of the things that I strive for in my life is to be what you see is what you get. So hopefully, if you bump into me Thursday afternoon pumping gas, you're going to see the same guy you see on Sunday morning. I really consciously try to do that. I don't think I have a problem with that because I'm not that clever to to be two different mics. The one that I am is hard enough to deal with, and so. But a lot of people do that. They put on a show. A lot of those types of folks go into politics. But there's all kinds of people, and everyone in here has encountered them before. That you see one person one way in one context, and you see an entirely different person another way in another context, and it's the same person. Well, God knows us. The gist of these verses is He knows us better than we know ourselves. So if I see somebody doing something, then that's what I see. If I see somebody digging a hole, then all I see is somebody digging a hole. But God He sees that, of course, but He also sees the motivation behind it, the expectation from it, why we're even doing it to start with. He knows all of that stuff that goes into the activity of digging a hole or whatever it is you're doing. He knows us better than He knows ourselves. And one of the things that struck me about starting to read these verses is all of the stuff that's happened in our life since this lesson was taught back in August of 2001, He knew all that stuff was coming too. And I'm thankful, looking back, that God went through all of that with me. I have said it before. Liz and I talk about this a lot. When we see somebody going through something particularly rough, we'll say we don't see how somebody that's not a Christian can deal with X, whatever that may be. And we believe that. There's things happen in our life that, if we didn't have the comfort of knowing that, it's all going to work out for good, because that's what God does. If we didn't have any hope that in the end it was going to be good, if we didn't have the hope that, this isn't all there is. This life, we want to make the best of it. We want it to last long and all of that. But no matter what we want, sooner or later it's going to come to an end. And, we have a good idea. I mean, I can't say I know every nut and bolt about what's going to happen once we die, but I know that whatever it is going to be better. I know whatever it is going to be. The word heaven is used for a reason. And so I don't know what the daily activities are going to be, but I know that heaven is going to be heaven. So I know that. Regardless of what happens from point A to point B, when I actually get there, I know what's coming. And for those that are in this world today that don't have that hope or that knowledge, again, I can't fathom living a life like that. Verse 5 and 6 says, Thou hast beset me behind and before, and hast laid thine hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain unto it. So when this verse says He has His hand upon us, and now the thing that I envision is like when Abby was little. It started out, her mobility was we picked her up and carried her. Whether it was in her arms or in her baby carrier. I still remember the first day Liz and I would come in from church, wherever we'd come from, we'd set Abby down in her car seat, and then we'd go do all the stuff we wanted to do, which means changing into our sweats, and then come back, and Abby'd still be in the car seat, and then we'd go do whatever it is we was going to do. Well, one Sunday we came in from church, we set Abby down, we went to put on her sweats, came back, and Abby wasn't in the car seat. Well, that was interesting. First time that had ever happened, and she had got out and rolled or walked or something. Anyway, she hadn't gone far, but we were just expecting her to be in a car seat, and she wasn't. And so now she progressed from that to holding her hand, to not holding her hand,
to teaching her how to drive, to watching her drive out of the driveway. Now she doesn't even live with us anymore. And so as life progresses, we see in verse 5 and 6, thou hast beset me behind and before and laid thine hand upon me. So whatever it is Abby's going and doing today, Liz and I don't have our hand on her now, but God does. And just as when we did have our hand on Abby, she didn't always go where we were trying to lead her to go. And, you know, we don't always go where God's wanting us to go either. He's got his hand upon us, and he's trying to tell us where to go. And we'll get distracted by the shiny object over here, and we'll go check that out when he was wanting us to go that way. And so these verses don't denote that God controls our every move. Not that he controls it, but he's there with us. We do still have free will. And so in verse 6, the writer says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain unto it. So considering these things in the first 6 verses were just huge for me when I kept coming back to this book and I sat down and started reading it. And I'll go ahead and say the thing that I wanted to talk about tonight was in Matthew chapter 7. There's no way for me to say these things that I'm going to say without it being a little bit political, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, saw where the president came out with his announcement for Easter Sunday that it was going to be a national day of recognition of, the transgender thing. And then he took it a step farther by banning religious symbols from the art contest at the White House Easter egg hunt. And this is on Easter. In my opinion, there are those that like Christmas better, and that's okay. I'm not going to argue with you on that, but I like Easter. Easter to me is the most holy of days. And so I was reading that story and I was just appalled. And of course you can imagine the social media, the stuff on the phone. Thankfully, there was a lot of people that was appalled about it as I was, but then there was others that came in and said, oh, it's always been on March 31st, yada, yada, yada. Well, maybe, but Easter's been Easter for a whole lot longer than that day's been that day. And the thing that kept coming back to my mind was in Matthew where you'll be known by the fruit you bear. And that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. That the thing that we show to the world is what the world's going to see. So when you have someone in power show that, then that's what we see. When you have someone that, for whatever reason, has the spotlight on them, they're on camera, they're in front of everybody, they get the press, then what they say gets heard. How they act gets paid attention to. The stuff they say is good. A certain group of people say that's good. Whatever they say is bad, that's what they say is bad. And to me, I took that a little bit personal. I keep up with politics a lot. I just find it interesting. But in this particular case, that was my God that was getting slighted. That was his day that was getting derailed. That was the sacrifice of Jesus Christ that he came and did for me. Now, he did it for you too, okay? Not any more me than you, but he did it for me, okay? All of the stuff that I did, because I was saved as an adult, I had some time to do some stuff that wasn't just kid stuff. Now, it wasn't bad or horrible or heinous, but sin, and I did some. And he forgave that. He covered that up. He cast it away as far as the east is from the west, and he did that for me. And here we've got that. And, you can say what you want, but Matthew tells us we're known by the fruit we bear. We're known by the presentation we give to the world. And so when my thinking along those lines got derailed back into this, it was like God was saying, don't worry about that. Everybody's Christian can see what that was. Talk about this. And it called to my memory the things that had happened in life since this lesson was taught. And focusing on the fact that, people can huff and puff. People can do this and people can do that. And people that have power can do some bad things or good, as the case may be. But God is still in control. He's still omniscient. He's still omnipotent. He's still omnipresent. And so moving forward into verse 7, going through 12, it says, "Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost part of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yea, the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to thee." So when I got down to this part here, it's easy to get worked up in this world today, whether it's that or something else. I mean, we get, in a fizz about stuff. And this sort of redirected my focus. And so in verse 7, we see, it says, "Whither shall I go from thy spirit, or whither shall I flee from thy presence?" So we're not going to escape the presence of God. Now, you may not always want him there, but he's always going to be there. He sees us at our worst. He sees us at our best. He sees the whole smash. And I find it interesting that, being omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent, he sees all this, and he saved me anyway. And so knowing that, where we see in verse 7 that no matter where you go, he's going to be there, and he chose to save me anyway, then that helped redirect my focus on the things that are productive rather than the things that are agitating. And so moving on down through verse 8 and 9 to verse 10, it says, even there, when it says, "Whether I ascend up into heaven or whether I make my dwelling in hell," verse 10, "Even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me." So God's hand leads and directs. Now, we don't always obey, as I said a while ago, but he leads and he directs. And one of the things about a Wednesday night class is you guys know a lot of the backstory. When I first started teaching Sunday school, I was teaching high school boys. And so at that age group, it's a different kind of teaching because, teaching a class like this, you guys have got years and years and years of having classes like this, so you just know stuff. Well, when you're teaching the young ones and the teens, they don't have years under the belt and they don't know stuff. They don't have, some of them do, but they don't have the background we do. And so verse 10 to us, "Even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me." Everyone in here, I'll step out and say, probably has at some time in your life done something that you knew better than to do. Maybe I'm the only one, but I doubt it. I think probably everybody in here has done stuff that you knew better than to do. And I say this kind of flippantly, but it also is 100% true. A lot of the stuff that I know best are the stuff that I learned the hard way. And, I kept thinking about that when I was studying this verse. God leads, we just don't always follow. God guides, but sometimes we resist. The lure of wanting to do things our own way, the lure of the things that we see and do and participate in this world is powerful. We have to actively resist a lot of the things that are going to pull us in this world. And so in verse 10, when we're feeling the pull, I guess if you will, of sin, the pull of the world, the pull of Satan, go back to verse 10, "Even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me." So you are not abandoned. Even if you are facing a particular task alone, as in nobody is with you bodily, God is with you. Verses 11 and 12, "If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yea, the darkness hideth not from me, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to thee. And that's probably what really redirected my focus from the indignation that I was feeling about that thing that came out of Washington. And I was all ready to load up the guns and talk about it tonight. And God said, let's do something different. And so then when I got to these two verses, the focus isn't on, or shouldn't be, from us anyway, on all the wickedness of this world. Because there's plenty of that. And you don't need me to talk about that, or Brother Steve, or anyone else. We don't need any help to dwell on that. And, you think about it, a lot of the things that happen in this world that are bad, a lot of the sins that go on in this world, they're done at night or in the dark. It's kind of like, if you have ever, when I was a kid, we lived in Florida. And if you live in Florida, you have roaches. That's just the way it is. You could live in an insecticide factory and you're still going to have roaches. And when you got up at night and turned on the lights, the roaches went everywhere. Well, that's kind of like what sin does. If sin is active and running and doing its thing in the dark, that's where it likes it best. And when the light comes in, the bad stuff starts easing back. You ever caught a little kid doing something that a little kid ought not to be doing, and the little kid knows they ought not to be doing it? When you walk in the room with them, it's like, they know they're busted. And it's sort of a comical example, but that's kind of the way sin lives. Sin thrives in darkness. Sin thrives in darkness because it thinks, or Satan thinks, I don't know what he's thinking, but sin seems to take hold and grow when the darkness is there. And these verses tell us it may be dark. There may be an absence of light where you can't see and you stumble around some and stub your toes, but God is still there. Not even the darkness hides anything from God. Not even our own attempts to hide things from God are successful, because night is irrelevant to him. He sees all. He's omniscient, he's omnipresent, he's omnipotent. So nothing is an obstacle to him. So as I was reading through this, some things came to mind that knowing God's presence is there, it should restrain us from evil. So that nagging thought, or that conscience, or whatever word you want to attach to it, when sin is tempting you and there's something holding you back, it's your knowledge, at least in part, of these things that should restrain you from evil. The truths of these verses, that God is with you, he's intentional about it, he is where he wants to be, should humble us. I mean, it humbles me to think of the fact that the sovereign of this universe that spoke everything into existence goes with me where I go. The truth of these things should strengthen us and humble us, to give us, the intestinal fortitude to face the things that are coming at us. Because, that statement about Easter was just one statement from one person, but it's kind of the thought process that we're dealing with in the world today that's much more in your face than it ever has been before, at least in my opinion. And so it's easy, because we don't have you don't have someone that's bringing the Word of God with the kind of microphone that those that are against God have. And so coming back to a section like Psalm 139 should give us strength, and it should also humble us. The next thing is these truths, knowing what God does for us, has done for us, and will continue to do for us, should give us an incentive for holy living. So, I've said it in my Sunday school class before, it's not hard to live like a Christian when you're inside this building. We all come here to act like Christians. We do Christian stuff when we're here. We all, clean up and comb our hair and brush our teeth before we come up here, and all of that. So this is where we come to be Christians. Well, it ought not to be the only place that we come to be Christians. We ought to be Christian no matter where we are, what we're doing. So, if you catch me over at my farm, I'll be dirty, and I'll be sweaty, and I'll smell like diesel fuel, and whatever it is I'm doing, but you should still find a Christian there. And then the last thing is knowing these things should inspire us to worship. And so, you know, I saw a thing, it's funny, but it's also true. Several people have shared it on Facebook that, I forget exactly how it's worded, but talking about Easter, going to church on Easter, it said 99.9% of the churches that everybody went to on Easter Sunday will be open again this Sunday. And I thought that was pretty interesting. The numbers will be different, probably for our church too, for next Sunday than they were this past Sunday. But, you know, knowing these things from Psalm 139 should act as a motivator for us, you know, to do the things, I guess, if you will, of Christians. And moving on, verse 13 says, "For thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well." Let me read that again. I messed up the punctuation. Verse 14, "I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect, and in thy book all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned when as yet there was none of them." So I don't think anyone in here is going to disagree with the things that I'm about to say, but we seem to be continuously having this fight in society about abortion and all of this sort of thing. And these verses tell us flat out that God built us in the womb. And He didn't just build us in the womb. He made us. He made me. He made you. You know, you occasionally get a set of twins that look alike, but even they're different. They have unique idiosyncrasies that have never existed before and will never exist again. God created a specific person. You know, we've got two ladies in here tonight named Brenda, but they're not the same. You know, they're different women. And each person is different. Each person is specifically made by God. Each person is done the way He intended for you to be. He built you for a purpose. And, you know, when I study these things, I get to thinking about some of the weirdest things. But I go back to when I was in 7th grade and I had ag. And I learned more in ag than any class I had in school because I wasn't raised with a dad to teach me this stuff, so I learned it in ag. And so when it came time to go in the shop, one of the first things that we built as a class was we all built a bookcase. And we all had the same plans for the bookcase. And then we had the same materials that Mr. Morrow told our parents to go buy for us at Tiffin's. The same stuff, same plan, same tools, same everything. But the bookcases were different when they were done. I mean, they're similar, you know, so similar in size, similar in shape, similar design, but, you know, you had a bunch of 7th graders, the first time they used a jigsaw, the round part at the top wasn't necessarily perfectly round, and the stain was maybe a little uneven. So it was interesting that no matter how hard we tried, you know, because Mr. Morrow had been teaching ag for decades, you know, same teaching, same wood, same tools, same instructions, same everything, but we couldn't, you know, make it the same. And we, you know, our best effort resulted in something different. And then when I was thinking about that, the attention that God puts into making each baby, you know, of course, He's God and He does it fast and quick and all of that, but to make our veins, to decide what color hair we're going to have, or in my case, if I'm going to have hair and what age I'm going to be when it all's gone. He decided all that, and He hadn't told me, but it's going. You know, fair skin, you know. I walk across my yard without shirt sleeves and I get sunburned. Somebody else walk across the yard and camp out there and never get pink. So we're all different. And God made each one of us specifically, no better, no worse. It is amazing to me to just look at people and how we have similar things, 2 arms, 2 legs, walk, talk, all that stuff, but we're different. And so I was reminded too of Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. It says, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations." So before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. So before you were conceived, God knew you were coming. He already had you, whatever it is he does to know you're coming, that was done. Before thou camest forth out of the womb, or before you were born, I sanctified thee. So he set us apart for his service. Whether we end up following that or not is up to us. But before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee. And then he's speaking to Jeremiah, of course, a prophet unto the nations. So before we were ever conceived in birth, God knew what we were going to be. He knew my eye color, my hair color, how tall I was going to be. You know, all of the characteristics of, whatever, how long my fingers are versus how long somebody else's are. We all have fingers, but they're different. And so God formed each one of us. He built each one of us specifically. And so we have a society today that seems to want to treat a baby as an inconvenience, as something to be disposed of to avoid consequence, as something of no value. And it's one of the saddest things that there is, that you have a creation of God that's unique. Never been one like them, never will be another. And we have people that will shout from the mountaintops that it's okay to eradicate. And it's not. We're told, Psalm 139 is old, it's in the Old Testament, but there's a lot of stuff in this that is just hugely important for us in our lives today. Verses 17 and 18 takes a little deeper. It says, "How precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they are more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with thee." So I thought it was interesting, this word precious. We're not stuff, but this is the analogy that came to mind. We all have stuff, and we have a hierarchy of stuff. The things we have, the stuff that's up here, this is the precious stuff. And then stuff that's down here is the junk. And so God tells us in these verses, verse 17, "How precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God." So not only did he form us, not only did he build us exactly the way he intended for us to be, but now that we're here, we're precious. And that's a big deal. There's a lot of, and it's sad. That article that was talking about the loneliness and stuff. There's so many people in this world today that don't know they're precious. They don't think they're precious. If you told them they were precious, they'd, "Oh, no, I'm not." They are. I am. You are. Everybody is. We are built exactly the way God intended for us to be, and we are precious to him. And, Brother Scott used to talk about the verse that he never quite understood was the one that said, "Precious in the eyes of the Lord are the death of his saints." And then this verse here tells us that we're precious. We have value. We have worth. We are unique. And we were created for a purpose. And God has laid all of that out even before we were conceived. And then for the remainder of the chapter, it says, "Surely thou wilt slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, ye bloody men, for they speak against thee wickedly, and thine enemies take thy name in vain. Do I not hate them, O Lord?" do I not hate them, O Lord, that hate thee? And am not I grieved with those that rise up against thee? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them mine enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. So, pretty interesting that this last section is a real abrupt change from talking about God's precious creation to immediately going over to God's enemies. But it's unfortunate and it's sad that we live in a world today where we have to recognize that there are enemies of God. There are those out there who seek to do us harm, would love nothing better than to disrupt this church service. I would love nothing better than for the worship of Christ to be eradicated from the face of the earth. We need to recognize that yes, we are precious, and they are too, by the way, but we do have enemies. You know, Satan, he never quits. He never gives up. He's still out there. He's hammering away. And whenever he takes one from God, that's a victory for him. And so, first and foremost, to make sure that these attributes that I named off from this chapter are foremost in our own minds. And then, you know, spread that as much as you can. Don't let the attack that came on our most holy day. And again, you may think Christmas is most holy, and I certainly wouldn't argue with that, but I like Easter. To me, it's our most holy day. It commemorates the day that Christ was victorious over my enemy. The thing that would condemn me, he's taken away and given me a way to avoid it. And, you know, no matter how hard the world works, that's not the first attack that's ever been on Easter, and it won't be the last if time stands much longer. So don't do like me and focus on that for a day. Come back to Psalm 139 and dig up a Sunday school lesson from 23 years ago that, you know, I taught back then, and call it back to your memory. Remember that you're precious. Remember that God goes with you, that you are what God intended you to be. He has an intention for you in your life. He loves you unlike any other ever will, ever have, or ever could. Have any questions or comments, any other prayer requests or praise items before we dismiss? Brother Steve wanted me to remind everyone about Master's Men this Sunday at 7 o'clock. Any other announcements before we dismiss? Well, I appreciate everyone being here. Please remember the prayer requests and the praise items, and if we'll stand, we'll be dismissed with a quick word of prayer. Father, thank you for allowing us to come together in your house once again tonight. Thank you for each and every person that's here. We thank you for the opportunity each and every time to come together and worship you. Lord, we ask that you be with each prayer request that was lifted tonight, the spoken, the unspoken. We ask that you move in those as only you can. We thank you for the praise items and give you all the honor and the glory for that. We ask that you watch over us as we break and go our separate ways. Help us and guide us in all that we do to always do what's right in your sight. These things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.